Hey everybody out there in internet land, this is Pat from Imperial Wheeling Machines in Hastings, Nebraska. Have a hand tool class coming up and figured I'd share a little hand tool tips and tricks kind of thing with you here. Got this set up kind of cooking show style. I've got the front edge turned on this panel and most of the back edge turned so I can show you where we're going with it. So this panel is the arm guard for a mini sprint on the right side. Keep you from getting hit with dirt and every other thing. So kind of a simple panel, big cake pan, but it's got a big curve on the front just for style points, kind of a backslashed looking recess there. So we've turned this edge over about 1/4 of an inch around that radius and around in the flat, and just give the panel a little strength, and so it doesn't have just a sheet metal raw edge there. Now I know some of you guys are wondering, well, why didn't you just put a wired edge on that? Well, I very well could have, but being a race car panel, this thing is gonna get damaged at some point. And I'd rather not have to open up an aluminum wired edge and try to straighten it out and shrink and stretch and fix it. So I may only make one of these panels, I may make 3 or 4, I don't know. But it would be an easier panel to repair with just a turned edge on it. So a lot of guys are thinking to themselves, well, yeah, turning that edge, that's no big deal. Well, you got to think, right here, we've got 1.25 inch radius. And I know some of you guys out there are going, well, yeah, just make a hammer form. Well, on that curved front, that takes this panel from a very economical panel for the local racer and turns it into a more expensive panel. And those guys know the stuff's going to get damaged. So it's kind of a balancing act there, guys. You can make a lot of tooling for these parts that you may only make once. It'll ensure a good result, but for what the customer is going to use it for, is that feasible? Now, I get a lot of people sending me questions and class guys, you know, where do I start? I really don't have a project in mind. Well, go find you some race car guys. They'd be delighted to have you. And if it's got a rough edge on it, chances are they're going to smash it anyway. And that's another good point of a lot of guys trying to learn sheet metal shaping. The goofy thing is, on a project, you know, if you're working on a classic car or something, you're only going to make that part one time. The race car guys and their little accidents here and there give you the chance to make something twice. Because how many times have you made something and you go, well, I know I could have done that different and that would have been faster. But on your classic car, you only needed one. So I'll step around the front here. Like I said, just a simple rolled edge on this thing will be easier to repair in the future. And there's a little bit of technical stuff to this, because that needs to be a big, broad bend radius. Because if we did a hammer form and that was a super sharp 90, all the vibration and beating and banging, anywhere you've got a real sharp corner, you know, if this was cut back and you had a sharp 90 in there, you've got a potential crack to start, as bad as these things vibrate and thump around. So you can see, you know, this is flared out. Again, it's got some neat technical things to it for a simple panel. It's a glorified cake pan, really. But to lay that open so there's no sharp corner for it to potentially tear. And up here, where we've got to turn this edge down, I drilled a hole in it here so it's got a nice round radius, no sharp corner. Just again, crack prevention. So A little less yammer, a little more action. Like I said, we could make a hammer form for this, but for your local race car guy, if we made a hammer form for this corner, we could use it here, but on the other end, it's not symmetrical. So you'd have to make 3 hammer forms, and you're ensured a good result, but did you just price yourself out of the job? So here we're just going to substitute a little bit of hand tool skill instead of leaning on the hammer form to produce the result for us. So no real fancy tooling here, guys. I've just got a random hunk of bar stock that's got a hole in it out of the scrap bin over there, and I sanded a nice broad radius on it. That's what I'm going to use for a dolly. Now, you know, I make about 80% of my own tooling, from hammers, dollies, post dollies, English, you know, all my English wheel stuff we make. Sometimes a hunk of heavy out of the scrap bin is the perfect thing for the job. Doesn't have to be fancy, it just has to work. So, speaking of not fancy, I'm going to anneal this corner. Do I need to? Absolutely not. But if I soften this corner and it's a little stiffer on each side where it's not annealed, I'm pushing this thing to naturally shrink. If I did it in the half hard state, by the way, this is 3003 H14, so it's half hard. If I did this in the half hard state, I've got to pay attention a little more to what I'm doing. I'm going to anneal just this corner so it will freely shrink. Now, and being in a race car application, if the corners are a little soft, that's okay, because you think there's more stress in the corners. If it's a little softer, it's probably not going to crack from vibration and abuse. So to anneal this, we're going to use the torch soot method, and you start talking about annealing and welding and all that stuff, and before you know it, your Uncle Bob's no good so-and-so and you don't know what you're talking about. The proper way to do this is with a temperature crayon. Yes, they do sell them. What is that temperature? Off the top of my head, I don't know. They make temperature crayons just for it. So we're going to use the torch soot method. I'm going to light the torch, and I'm going to put a little bit of oxygen to it, because I don't want real heavy soot. You can over soot your part and burn the aluminum before you burn the soot off. So light up my torch, just a little bit of oxygen, and that's all the heavier I'm going to soot that corner, guys. Now, when I burn that soot off, am I going to be perfectly annealed to temperature exactly the way it should be? No, I'm not going to be, but I will be soft enough that I will gain the benefit that that corner will freely shrink. So I'll turn this a little bit so you guys can see it better. I'm just going to gently heat that until the soot burns away. Like I said, am I annealed perfect? Dead perfect to O condition? Probably not. But it saves me from making a hammer form, and I don't really have to focus so intensely to make sure that it's not ruffling on me. So our hunk of heavy with a radius sanded on it, turn that over. And does this need to be hot while I do it? No. Just not gonna sit here and let it cool completely to room temperature and make this take forever. So now when I take this up and over, I am not going to strike this way like I'm trying to fold it around. I am going to hit on the edge at an angle like you're peening the edge, because that is going to shove it in on itself. Because remember, I only annealed 1/4 to 5/16 of an inch probably. So kind of back peening that is going to give me a little bit of that shrinking action. So again, not 90 degrees like I'm trying to fold it around, and not straight in on the edge, trying to thicken the edge. Kind of a funny angle, and you guys try that and try your angles, and you'll see what I mean. It's just helpful so it will freely shrink in the corner. So just working my way in that corner gently, up and around the radius, and I'll get him caught up right there with one of my Imperial composite dollies, because if I strike the dolly, I can't stretch the material. You guys didn't think you'd get out of this without some shameless product promotion, did you? Okay, so I'm caught up to how far I'm tipped. I'm not all the way up, but I want to bring it all up together. So I'll catch up on the top, and you can see why I drilled that hole up there. When we bring that up, it has a nice round corner where it transitions into that bend. Listen to the sound difference where it's not annealed. That's okay, so I'm going to bring that up pretty much the whole way, and I'll show you here how much the corner's got to catch up. So you can see I brought that up nice and high, but you can see that's blown out a little bit. That's okay. Now I'll bring this up nice and tight. So again, I've kind of got a wall of stiffness on each side, so that corner will shrink nice. Now you can see, oh, there we go. You can see that corner's nice. You roll the light around it, there's no warbles or bumps on that corner. That is why I annealed it. So I don't have to think that hard. I don't have to have a very technical approach to this. I'm stacking the deck in my favor. So again, I brought it up to my 90 there, to my 90 there, and it's pooched out a little bit here. Well, what is that? It's kind of a glorified tuck shrink. So we will go back to our little hunk of heavy, and we'll work that up the rest of the way here. Now as I'm going back and forth, that corner's walking a little bit this way and that way. That's okay. Everybody's trying to find a home, And where it's annealed, it'll find a home much easier. So another reason to anneal this is so this comes up and it will freely shrink, but also it will hold this radius. So I won't have to come back in here with a shrinker stretcher correction and put teeth marks in this nice aluminum panel. I know it's going to get vinyl wrapped anyway, but you want that part to look super nice before it gets wrapped. Okay, so we're up and in good shape there. Okay, so now I have a minor correction, even though I'm annealed. You can see me yammering and talking. I use the non-sanded edge of that round hunk of heavy. I'm a little sharp right there. You can see that in the reflection. How this is nice and soft, this is nice and soft. I'm a little bit sharp right there. That's okay. Make a mental note when you're talking, orient the dolly correctly. Making mistakes so you don't have to. Again, sanded edge of the dolly. Cram him in there. And I'm gonna strike right on the edge of where that's a little too sharp. Now guys, this is where I don't want to edit these videos to death, because if I make a small mistake, I'll point it out and I'll show you guys, because a big part of this is getting your keister out of the campfire. So just a little bit more, and we're going to call that pretty good. Trying to keep my big head out of the way. Yeah. So I have softened him right up. You kind of look at the highlight line, kind of that dark line. It rolls around the corner nice where that was sharp before. So a little bit more tuning and tickling, but just showing you guys some of this stuff doesn't have to be that hard. You don't have to make a hammer form for every little thing. And like I said, this being a race car panel, if you've got to make 3 pieces of tooling, did you price yourself out of the job? Just a hammer form would ensure that we get a good result. You cut out your wood and take a router bit and buzz it, and the edge radius will be perfect. Well, this part is going to get damaged. It is. But thought I'd share that with you guys. Not anything earth-shattering, but hope that gives you a little confidence in some things. Because again, is that annealed perfectly to O condition? Probably not. It did what we needed it to. I made a small mistake and had to correct it. Again, not a big deal. Part of this is getting your keister out of the campfire. And, you know, just like I said, there's a few technical things, like where I drilled that hole, that is now a nice straight line. Well, there's no sharp corner in there for that to potentially start a crack. But I think we'll stick a fork in it there, guys, and thanks for hanging out with me a little bit this morning. Remember to comment, like, share, all that good stuff. If you have any questions, fire them off in the comments. You want to look at our class schedule or any of the tools that we offer, head over to wheelingmachines.com, and all that stuff is there. But like I said, we'll stick a fork in it, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.